It used to be so simple and so restrictive. If you wanted a genuinely rapid SUV, you had to buy something huge and unwieldy. The Audi SQ5 changed all of that by offering us the world's fastest diesel SUV in a manageably sized package. The brand's first ever TDI-powered S model delivers a thumping 313 PS packaged in a compactly practical body shape filled with all the usual Audi good stuff inside. There's 540 litres of luggage space, comfortable seats for 5, and it can even get over 40 miles from a gallon of diesel if you drive sedately. Yet it can climb a 31-degree gradient, cruise across a muddy field, and on tarmac charge to 62 miles an hour in 5 seconds. Truly a very special car. Audi knows a thing or two about fast diesel sports cars. It won the Le Mans 24-hour race as long ago as 2006 under TDI power, and since then we've seen ever more rapid and hugely potent V8 and even V12 diesel engines in cars like the A8 and the Q7. There's never yet though been a sporting S model fuelled from the black pump, until the launch of this car, the SQ5. Yes, it's an SUV, but it's an SUV unlike any you've ever experienced before. The key reason why lies beneath the bonnet. Tucked under here is a 313 PS twin-turbo V6 TDI power plant, endowing this mid-size 4x4 with phenomenal punch. Before this car was launched in the spring of 2013, SUV buyers in search of that sort of acceleration used to have to stretch up towards the lottery-winning price tags demanded by top performance versions of much larger models like Porsche's Cayenne, Mercedes M-Class or BMW's X5. In creating this performance flagship for the smaller Q5 range, Audi has made things a little more accessible. With the SQ5, you have all of the practical aspects of a normal Q5. That means it'll quite happily do the family duties, commute in comfort, put in a performance at IKEA, and be low-key enough for you to happily park on the street without a worry. Yet somehow this model still retains the ability to outsprint a Porsche Cayman sports car. Quite an all-rounder then. Let's put it to the test. Although this model doesn't wear an RS badge, don't for one moment let that lull you into thinking that it's anything but full on. The SQ5 is not only the first diesel Audi to carry an S badge, but it was also the first SUV from the Ingolstadt company to come in for the Go Faster treatment. New territory then for the German brand, and it wants to put on a bit of a show. Perhaps show isn't the right word, as to look at it's all rather low-key. Yes, there are plenty of the usual performance cues, like a flat-bottom steering wheel, hip-hugging seats, big alloy wheels and commensurately big brakes, but the SQ5 does a good job of blending in. The disguise drops as soon as you work the throttle pedal though. It's interesting that this car hasn't gone the usual route for the fastest Audi products. They're usually developed by Quattro GmbH. This one hasn't been, instead being the work of Audi AG's own in-house chassis development team. A dilution then of the S-car ethos? Well, it certainly feels suitably sporting from the driver's seat. Right from the get-go, the impression is of a very well-engineered product indeed. One of those cars where you can tell that some serious work has gone into the control weights and the balance of the chassis. It rides firmly, mind you, the more so here since the standard 20-inch alloys have been replaced in this car by even huger 21 inches, the result being that a fair bit of bump and thump intrudes into the cabin at normal road speeds. Not enough to be considered uncomfortable, but sufficient to ensure that even if you didn't know a lot about cars, you'd quickly twig that this wasn't a normal Audi Q5. It's a point that's rammed home in less than subtle fashion if you flick the transmission into sport mode and bury the throttle. This car is properly rapid. Too rapid, in fact, for the 7-speed S-tronic twin-clutch transmission Audi normally uses on the Q5. An older style Tiptronic 8-speed automatic was just about the only gearbox Audi had that could handle the 650 newton meters of torque this engine cranks out, which is only a handful of newton meters less than you get in something enormously potent like a Bentley Continental V8. Sidestep the brake pedal, giving this SQ5 the treatment, and it'll get to 62 miles an hour in 5.1 seconds before powering on to its 155 mile an hour speed limiter without feeling at all breathless. Without access to a runway today, I'll have to take Audi's word on that one. Probably the thing that's impressed me most about this SQ5 though is the sheer accessibility of that performance. Unlike many seriously equipped models, you don't have to balance the car on the clutch or have any worries about managing traction. It just grips and goes. You'd never think that you were firing almost 2 tons of premium German real estate up the road, such as the seamless torque of the 3-litre bi-turbo engine. The Quattro all-wheel drive transmission means that it's barely any slower in the wet, conditions in which a rear-driven performance estate would sit with its rear tyres spinning impotently. That's what defines this car. It delivers so consistently without asking too much in return. We've seen this model's 6-cylinder diesel unit before in Audi's A6, but for this installation it's been given a few tweaks. And yes, these do amount to a bit more than just the change of a few lines of code in the electronic control unit. The cooling of the cylinder heads, control times and strokes of the intake camshafts, the pistons, their spray oil cooling and the piston rods have all been adapted for this model. But let's concentrate on what it all means. Namely that everything the bi-turbo power plant has to offer, its full quota of torque, is available from just 1,450 RPM. In other words, little more than a trickle of throttle is required to get the SQ5 moving with some purpose. In this respect, it's very unturbo-like and more like a big capacity, normally aspirated V8. Sadly, it doesn't sound like that. This isn't a power plant you'll ring out to the red line just to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. But it does make a nicely purposeful rumble at low revs, helped by a sound actuator in the exhaust system that pumps up the bass a bit, though I would say that it starts to sound a bit strained if you keep at it in gear. Better to flick up a bit early on the paddle shifters or just let the gearbox's own software take control. Shift times are almost as quick as if Audi had fitted the higher-tech S-tronic twin-clutch transmission, but such is the linearity of the power delivery that you just feel this inexorable shove from behind as the horizon scrolls towards you on fast forward. But does it really handle like a proper Audi S car should? Does it even have the tools to do that job? After all, you'd think that it would need them. Get a bit enthusiastic with 313 PS on a wet roundabout, and it doesn't take long to be reminded that you're strapped into nigh on 2 tons of high-riding SUV. A car that you'd think would benefit from some kind of damper control setup, like the dynamic ride control system developed for the RS6. Or the rear axle sport differential that on, say, an S4 pushes power to the outside wheel as you turn to literally pull the car through the corner. Now, none of this technology is fitted to an SQ5, and not much has been done to the electromechanical steering either, which even on an ordinary Q5 lacks driving involvement. It all explains why there's certainly scope for this car to be a more rewarding tarmac tool than it currently is, and a closer match for the fast-flowing excellence that characterises a rival BMW X3 35D. But for all this, the SQ5 remains an enjoyable and rewarding sporting car, thanks in no small part to the effectiveness of the latest version of Audi's Quattro four-wheel drive system. Now, in normal motoring, this setup's centre differential pushes 60% of power to the rear, but if traction changes, that can alter in milliseconds, with up to 70% of the power shifted to the front and up to 85% to the rear. You also get a torque vectoring system, which works through the turns to counter both understeer and wheel spin by lightly micro-braking whichever wheel is threatening to lose grip. Now, as a result, the car's kept planted through the tightest corner and you're fired on from bend to bend. As I mentioned previously, you can't tweak the suspension to suit the road that you're on and the mood that you're in, but providing you tick the box for Audi's now familiar Drive Select setup, you can alter just about everything else about the feel and responsiveness of this SQ5 at the touch of a button. The system offers 5 main modes: comfort for longer trips, or dynamic if you're pressing on what everything this SUV has to offer. Efficiency maximises all the car's systems towards frugality, while the individual setting allows you to configure all the different drive elements to your own particular preferences. Finally, the auto mode will suit those who simply can't be bothered to choose and want to rely on the software to select the best setup to suit the current driving situation. And the steering? Well, no, the standard setup doesn't offer much feedback, but it is a lot better if you go for the extra cost variable ratio dynamic steering option that I'm trying here, which gives you a bit more confidence to push into tighter corners that reveal a standard of body control that isn't at all bad when you're driving hard. Now, partly this is because of the lowered S Sport suspension. Though the basic alignment of the suspension hasn't changed here, Audi has taken 30mm out of the regular Q5's ride height, stiffened its springs and anti-roll bars, and specified stiffer fixed-rate dampers. But the result is a car that feels well engineered, right up to about 8/10. Try any harder than that and it can feel a bit of a handful. Perhaps that's no bad thing. More than 8/10 on a public road in a car with as much power as this one has under its bonnet is enough to put you in front of a magistrate. The downside of that lowered suspension is that it has quite an impact on the kind of off-road capability you could otherwise expect from a Q5. Ground clearance falls from 200 to 170mm, which means that the wading depth falls massively from 500 to 170mm. The slope angle falls from 25 to 18.3 degrees, and the ramp angle is reduced from 17.6 to 12.1 degrees. At least the maximum gradient you can attempt is unchanged at 31 degrees. All of which will matter not one jot to likely SQ5 owners. This car will still happily manage a heavily rutted forest track, a seriously muddy car park, a snowy snap and all types of towing, which is all they'll really want from it. And you do still get hill descent assist to help you down the steepest off-road slopes. Overall then, what have we ended up with here? An SUV that's as quick as you'll ever need it to be? Certainly. The steering, gearbox and brakes are all up to the job, even if the suspension runs out of answers if you really pose it some tough questions. In other words, a well-judged package that's definitely more S than RS. And unleashing the full 313 PS out of a roundabout, well, believe me, that never gets old.
Audi has perfected its own unique and very subtle brand of design language that manages to underplay almost everything. Can you think of an extrovert-looking car in the company's mainstream product lineup? No, nor me. And the same theme continues with this SQ5. You read the specification list and expect it to look like some sort of tarmac grazing, testosterone-stuffed serial killer of a car that should carry an 18 certificate. But in the metal, the overall effect is deceptively mild. Look closely though, and all the performance cues are there. Most notably emphasised by exclusive S Sport suspension, dictating a ride height that sees this car running 30mm nearer to the ground than other Q5s. The wheel arches are amply filled by large 20-inch, or in this case 21-inch alloys. And at the front, as well as the usual Audi S model aluminium look mirror housings, you get xenon headlamps flanking a platinum grey single frame radiator grille with galvanised twin struts in an aluminium finish, plus a modified bumper assembly. The rear makes a statement too, with a roof spoiler, an S-specific bumper design and quadruple tailpipes. And inside, Well, like all Q5 models, this SQ5 has a spacious feel, emphasised by the way that the sport seats sit you high up with a commanding view out over the less fortunate motorists you'll be shaping up to pass. Issues are few. It's not possible to position the seats so that you feel a little more sporty, a little more hunkered down in the car, and the chunky A-pillars can sometimes slightly obscure your view at junctions or at roundabouts. That's about it. The cabin is, of course, beautifully appointed, and the optional flat-bottomed sport steering wheel I have here sets it all off perfectly. It's all primarily trimmed in black, as you'd expect an S model to be, but if you find this all a bit sombre, a lunar silver headlining, which is more restrained than it sounds, and a variety of inset colours for the sports seats can be specified as an option. These seats are electrically adjustable, nicely bolstered, and finished in soft Napa leather as standard. This particular car sets it all off with a set of optional carbon fibre trim panels. But if you think that's going a bit far in what is, after all, still an SUV, then you can also pay extra to select between the brushed aluminium, piano black, or aluminium Beaufort finishes available. Some highlights? Well, I love the rubber and metal pedal set, the simple elegance of this dual gauge instrument dial pack, the beautiful contrast between dark and light finishes in the cabin, and the S-specific touches. Features such as the S gear shift knob and the further S badges you'll find on the door sill trims, the rev counter and the steering wheel. It's a cleanly styled dash too, thanks to the reduction in button clutter made possible by Audi's well-regarded Mmi Control interface. I've got it here in optional Mmi Navigation Plus form, in which guys the number of fixed keys has been cut down to just 4: navigation, telephone, radio and media. It all works effectively, but it's a system that rewards some dedicated learning time if you were to get the most from it. In the back, thanks to the long 2.81 metre wheelbase, the reclinable rear seat offers comfortable space for 2 adults or 3 at a push. People who'll thank you for specifying the rear bench seat plus option, which enables this rear bench to slide back and forth to prioritise either passenger legroom or luggage space. And talking of luggage space, well, the 540 litre cargo bay, accessed via a usefully low loading lip, may not be the largest in the class, but it's not far off it, and is big enough to take 4 golf bags, which seems to be Audi's standard unit of volume. Weighty stuff can be taken too, thanks to a 580 kilogram payload capacity. And there's also a useful underfloor compartment where you can throw wet or dirty gear or just items that you might want to keep out of sight. Plus, you get a useful selection of hooks, power sockets and fastenings. Flexibility you can add to by specifying Audi's neat rail-mounted load security system. Go for the sliding rear seat and you also get a useful through load system for longer items. But if you need more room than that, then pulling these latches on the sidewall of the luggage compartment and pushing forward the split folding rear seat increases the capacity to 1,560 litres and offers up a maximum load length of 170 centimetres. You'll need a £45,000 budget for ownership of this SQ5, and if you're typical of many likely buyers, you'll then want to further spend £10,000 or more on extras to create a car like the one I have here. So excellence doesn't come cheap. That's one way of looking at it. Another is to simply remember that this car requires an entirely reasonable premium of no more than around £4,000 over a humbler Q5 3-litre TDI Quattro S-Line variant from the standard range. And the extra cash gets you another 68 PS, an 8 rather than a 7-speed auto gearbox, and plenty of extra equipment. Sounds fair enough to me. You might wonder whether there are actually any segment competitors that can directly match the sheer range of talent on offer here. After all, they're very fastest versions of rival pokey premium compact SUVs. Top derivatives of cars like Mercedes GLA, Volvo's XC60, Range Rover's Evoque and Infinity's EX37 are all petrol rather than diesel powered. But there is one contender that can claim a very similar CV, BMW's X3 xDrive 35D M Sport. Now, it may not have a snappier name as the SQ5, but it's not far off in terms of all-round ability. It's around £1,000 cheaper, but isn't as well equipped as the Audi. It also gets a 6-cylinder twin-turbo diesel 3-litre, good for an identical 313 PS, which surely isn't coincidental. Despite this, it's about a second slower to 62 miles an hour than the SQ5 and never feels quite as special an ownership proposition. It's a genuinely fun steer on a bumpy back road in a way that the SQ5 can't quite match, but the cabin feels that of a car that's around £10,000 cheaper, and it's smaller inside as well. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is an SQ5 that you really want, you're then into the realm of specifying the thing. Now, to be fair, this standard kit tally is pretty complete. You get a gorgeous set of 20-inch parallel spoke design alloy wheels, S Sport suspension, S body styling, roof bars with a storage bag, front fog lights and xenon headlamps. Inside there's fine Napa leather upholstery, dressing electrically adjustable SQ5 embossed front seats, and further hide trimming the 3-spoke S Sport's multifunction leather steering wheel. As you'd expect, there are features like cruise control, parking sensors, 3-zone climate control, auto headlamps and wipers, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror and Bluetooth phone integration. Plus, there's a suitably high-end 180-watt Audi sound system with 10 high-performance speakers and a 6-channel amplifier, operable via a 6.5-inch colour central display. Plus, an aux-in connection and a DAB digital radio. It's a bit surprising to find on an Audi S model that Drive Select isn't standard. This the system that enables you to change gear shift, steering and throttle pedal feel at the press of a button. I think Audi should make the sliding rear bench you also have to pay extra for standard on all Q5s too. Beyond those two must-have items, tempting features include larger 21-inch alloy wheels, this huge open sky panoramic sunroof, the storage package that helps you make the most of the boot space, a power-operated tailgate and a thumping 14-speaker 505-watt Bang & Olufsen sound system. Plus, there's plenty of extra cost high-tech stuff too. The mobile telephone preparation high with Audi Connect option transforms your Q5 into a WLAN, that's wireless local area network, hotspot so that passengers can surf the internet and email via their mobile devices. It also brings customised online services into the car, such as Google Point of Interest search by voice control, navigation with Google Earth Images and Google Street View. Another useful feature is Audi Traffic Information Online that briefs you on traffic movements along your route. And the smartphone Audi Music Stream app that Q5 drivers can use to receive more than 5,000 internet radio stations. As for safety, well, there's all the usual airbags, twin front, side and curtain, plus a whole range of electronic driving aids to hopefully ensure that you never have to use them, with the ABS and the ESP stability control systems both featuring automatic off-road adaptability. Hill descent control helps you crawl down steep slopes, and the ESP can even detect if you have a loaded roof rack and adapt itself accordingly. I also like the way that the electromechanical power steering comes to your aid with gentle steering prompts when braking on split friction surfaces. Also standard is a rest recommendation system that's able to monitor your driving reactions to detect drowsiness before, if necessary, alerting you to stop for a restorative coffee. But of course, you can go further than that. Safety options include Audi Side Assist to stop you dangerously pulling out to overtake, and Audi Active Lane Assist to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. Plus, there's an adaptive cruise control with braking guard system that uses radar sensors to automatically keep you a safe distance from the car in front on the highway, with automatic braking instigated under speeds of less than 19 miles an hour if a hazard ahead is detected and appears to have been ignored. A typical Audi SQ5 owner is somebody who wants sledgehammer performance, but also expects the sort of running costs that not so long ago you saw from a 1.6 litre family hatch. A pretty demanding customer, in other words. And you know what? They're probably not going to be disappointed by this car. Drive it with a modicum of restraint, selecting the efficiency mode in the drive select system, and you might even get close to Audi's quoted 41.5 miles to the gallon combined cycle economy figure, which should mean a cruising range of over 725 miles from the 75 litre fuel tank. To be honest, I've found that accepting a manufacturer's urban cycle figure is a more representative guide to overall consumption, but in this case even that is a wholly respectable 37.2 miles to the gallon. Emissions are rated at 179 grams per kilometre, which isn't at all bad for a vehicle of this size and potency. True, these figures are about 10% behind those of BMW's directly comparable X3 xDrive 35D, but even so, over 40 miles to the gallon is nothing to be sniffed at in a family SUV that can trounce a Porsche Cayman sports car away from the lights. It's helped to this by an intelligent design approach. For instance, the use of lightweight aluminium in the tailgate, the bonnet and much of the crash structure, with more weight saved through employing strong, form-hardened steels in the occupant cell. Additional efficiency gains are realised from contributions from things like the regulated oil pump, as well as the thermal management and energy recovery systems. No, you don't get the trick cylinder shutdown technology on this engine that's featured on top petrol Audi S models, but an effective stop-start system is of course present and effective, cutting the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. What else? Well, insurance is rated at a rather hefty Group 41, and the 3-year 60,000 mile warranty isn't anything to write home about. Depreciation, though, seems to stack up well against this car's key BMW rival. An X3 xDrive 35D, specified to the SQ5's price tag, records residual values of 44.5% after 3 years and 36,000 miles. By contrast, this Audi retains a much healthier 49.5% of its value.
The world's fastest diesel SUV? You'd never know it, would you, from a casual glance, for this SQ5 is as subtle a sporting car as you could ever want. You have to look hard at the details, the quad exhaust pipes, the wider wheels and tyres and the silver-toned trim, to see that there's something special here. Very special, in fact. It's pretty hard to think of a single car that can do so much so well. This one's quick, composed, economical, well built, discreet and practical. As long as you're aware of its necessary limitations, it's even got a generous measure of fun fitted as standard. If you feel that you're owed something special, an indulgence if you like, but don't want to look like a midlife crisis on wheels, an Audi SQ5 could be exactly what you're looking for. It has all the outward trappings of measured responsibility, with a slightly demented dressing of excess included. Nobody needs a car like this, but drive it and you'll definitely want one. That much is guaranteed.